In this lesson, we're going to learn about file management and project organization. Alright, so at this point you would want to bring in assets into your project to begin creating your game. Now assets can be meshes, materials, textures, audio files, and animations, whatever you would need for your game to work as you intend. Okay, so to get started, the first thing we need to learn is how to create a folder, because folders are going to help us with organization of our project. So let's right-click on our Assets folder here in the project browser, and we're going to say Create Folder. Go ahead and give this a name called Meshes and hit Enter. Now with this Meshes folder, we can import assets into it. To import an asset into a folder, you'll simply right-click on the folder you want it to import to and say Import New Asset. Now from here, you will have your browser, and you want to choose the asset that you want to bring in. So in this case, I'm in my Assets folder, which is in my project files. Now I'm not going to provide this Assets folder for the particular course because it would double the file size, and we want to make this easy to download. If you want this Assets folder, all you have to do is go into Project Files, Unity Files, and then right-click on this, copy it, and then paste it right here in the Project Files folder if you want to follow along exactly the way that I am. Okay, so I'm going to go to Assets, and then I'm going to go to Meshes. Now with the Meshes folder, we're going to go into Environment, and I'm going to select mound_A, and I'm going to say Import. When we import that, you'll see it in your Asset Manager under the project browser, and you can see a little bit of a preview of that. Now you can see a preview as long as you have the size of your preview greater than 0. If it's at 0, which is all the way to the left, it'll give you this list format. This list format makes it very easy to find assets when you have lots and lots of assets in there. Another great way to find assets is by using the search. So if you just start to type in the name, it will show you anything that is relative to that input. Let's go ahead and erase Mound from that, and it will go back to the default view of that. Let's also take this to about 50% because I like to see that preview there. So now that we have this asset in here, what if we want to bring in multiple assets? Can we do that? Yes. Let's right-click on Meshes and go to Import New. But this method will not allow me to bring in multiples. Okay, so it only allows me to bring in one at a time. That's even holding down Control, holding down Shift. Okay, only one at a time using this method. Now what happens if I want to bring in multiple assets? Because I could have hundreds or even thousands of assets that go into my game. That's going to take a really long time, and I don't want to do that. A really quick way to get around this is to go to the folder that your assets are living. Bring it up just like this, and then just simply select the assets that you want to bring in. So I'm going to go to mounda_col for Collider, and then I'm going to hold Shift and go to the very bottom, and that will select everything in between. And then I'm going to left click, and I'm going to drag this into my project browser. You'll see that all of those have now been brought in, and we can now begin to organize these. Now these are in my Meshes folder, but these are going to be environment objects, and I like to keep things nice and clean, so I want to create a new folder inside of my Meshes folder. So I'm going to right-click on Meshes, Create Folder. With this, I'm going to call this Environment, and then I'm going to take all of these, so if I select even the materials here, and I hold Shift and select this last one, I can left-click and drag that into my folder. Perfect. So now that that has been brought in, we now have this nice and clean and organized. And so we can just jump in. We know that these are all environment objects. I can go back to Assets and then go on from there. So what happens if I want to bring in an entire folder? Let's say that I already have a folder structure already set up in my, my Assets folder. Well, we can bring in folders at a time. So let's take a look at our Characters folder. Let's left-click and drag that into the Meshes folder, and we'll drop that, and that will sit right next to Environment here. There's our Characters folder. We can now see that we have an Enemies folder. There that is. And then we have our hero character here with its animations. Okay, so very good. So we've learned how to manage our files, okay, keeping them nice and clean. Now, I also want to take a look at a couple of things in the environment folder, just to show you something really quickly. If we select an object or an asset in the project browser, you'll notice that we have some properties that show up here inside of the inspector. These properties will manage things like the scale factor, mesh compression, the normals and tangents. It will also allow us to import materials that are applied to it inside of our content creation package like 3ds Max or Maya. In this case, this object has a default material applied to it, and it's the material that was exported from 3ds Max. But let's say that I don't want that material. Let's say that I want to build my own materials right here inside of Unity. What I can do is tell it to not import any materials, and then all I have to do is hit apply. Okay, so now look, it says default material. Okay, so I don't have to worry about any materials that are not hooked up. Okay, now what does that look like? What do I mean by not hooked up? Okay, so let's take a look at these materials that are in our environment folder. Notice that I have a no-name material, and then I have this Rock Master material. Let's delete this Rock Master material and see what happens. If I delete this, it's going to bring up a dialog box, and it says, "Are you sure?" Because this is an undoable action. This is basically deleting the file from our folders. Okay, so let me show you really quickly. Let's bring this up. Let's go to our project files, Unity files, assets, meshes, environment, and materials. Notice Rockmaster right here. Let me go ahead and hit delete with that up there, and you'll notice that Rockmaster will disappear. Let's bring that back up, and it's gone. Let's do the same thing with, actually, let's just go ahead and delete that materials folder. Well, no, let's leave it. Let's delete this out. Let's go ahead and right-click and delete. Back here, you'll notice that we're in materials. There's nothing in there. Notice how it's reflecting exactly the way that we see inside of Unity. That's the way a Unity project works. So, what did that do exactly to our meshes? Let's select one of the meshes here. Let's select this rock_L. Notice that we have this magenta color. Magenta means that it is supposed to have a default material, but it got deleted. It cannot find it. And so a way that we get around that is by coming in and telling it to not import any materials. So we're going to hit apply, and you'll see now we have the default material applied to that. Now I would have to do that to all of these, but I don't have to do it individually. I can actually come in and select multiples, and I can select all of these in the project browser. And then I can come in and I can start to modify any options or parameters that are exactly the same across the selected objects. So for example, right here inside of the model section, all of these options or parameters are exactly the same, and so I can tell it to not import materials and then hit apply, and now all of those now have a default material. That is multi-object editing. So what else can I do with this? Let's select all of these, and let's go up to rig. Now you'll notice here that rig, it has an animation type, but it has a line through it. What that means is that there are some of these objects that have a different animation type than others. So let's actually select this, and you'll get a drop down, and it says none, legacy, generic, and humanoid. These rocks have zero need for a rig because they are not being animated. They don't even have bones in them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to none, and I'm going to hit apply. Now anytime that you set a rig to none, the animations are going to be set to null, so it's not even going to consider that. So now that that has been done, what does that do for us? Well, what that will do is it will clean up any components that might be automatically attached to a game object whenever it's imported. Okay, So what does that mean exactly? If we take a look at this character, I haven't done any editing on this. If I select this and expand it, you'll notice that there are multiple components tied to this. You'll notice this little LP robot. This is called an avatar. Anytime that an avatar is a component of a game object, what that will do is it will add an animator component. So go to your model, go to your components here down at the bottom, you'll see animator. Notice that avatar symbol there. Okay, so it's going to have that component. So I got rid of that. So now that we've talked about file management and project organization, what we want to do at this point is we want to bring in one more folder, and then we're going to move on into our next lesson where we're going to learn about creating prefabs. So I need to bring in my textures really quickly. It's going to be done exactly the same that we've been doing. We're just going to go to Unity files, project files, assets, textures, take that whole folder, drag it right onto assets. Make sure it's assets. It's going to create that textures folder, and it's going to bring all of the textures inside of that right into our Unity project. Now this may take about a minute to complete because textures can be very heavy on memory, and they're going to be a larger file size than most 3D objects. So give this just about a minute, and then I'll see you in the next lesson.